So this is a big one, and I think it has some really good stuff in it. We're in John chapter 13. I'll just read this real quick, verses 21 to 38. After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit. This is immediately after the foot washing. After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of his disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at a table at Jesus' side. So Simon Peter motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So that disciple, leaning back against Jesus, said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is he to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it." So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, "What you're going to do, do it quickly." Now no one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the feast," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answered him, "Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward." Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus answered, "Will you lay your life down for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. Okay, so we've got a critical passage here. We have been looking through John through the lens of authority. You can come at this from a lot of different angles. The Bible is so rich in depth and meaning, but we're trying to pull out examples of where Jesus demonstrates his authority. So like his miracles, which are mighty works. Everything Jesus does is a miracle. Even when he doesn't do something, his restraint is a mighty work, and so is meekness. And so we're kind of trying to find those things of where he is doing miracles, doing mighty works, and he certainly does that here in his demonstration of a love that the world does not understand. So we got 3 sections. Judas is going to betray Jesus. Jesus gives a new commandment, and Peter is going to have he's going to deny Christ in the near future. So we got kind of bookends here. We got a betrayal, and in the middle we have a new commandment, and then we have the coming denial. So the central concept of all of this that we need to focus on today is a question that a lot of people ask, and they say, why is Judas condemned and Peter gets to go to heaven, right? And a lot of people will try to identify with Judas. There's even a whole thing of like, well, he thought he was doing the right thing. He thought Jesus' ministry nobody was going to be able to kill Jesus, so he was just trying to get things moving on his own. He was doing it his way, and he made a terrible mistake. I don't think that plays out. It's an interesting speculation, but I don't think it plays out. And I think we have to be really careful who we identify with in the Bible, because a lot of that is trying to identify, I know I'm a sinner, and so I'm going to identify with this guy who's a sinner. I've messed up. I've done bad things, and I've betrayed people, and so I'm going to I meant well when I did it, And so I think there's an effort to try to see something good in Judas, that he was mistaken. But I'm going to say that I don't think that's the case at all. And try to explain why Peter's denial doesn't condemn him, whereas Judas's betrayal does. Or maybe it's not the action itself. What do these 2 things, the betrayal and the denial, have to do with the new commandment that's in the middle of these 2 things? I think that's an important question to ask. We'll come back at the very end to try to answer these questions. What can we apply and discern from this passage is another question that we're going to deal with. An important detail as we dive into this text is to know that Jesus didn't do what he did in order to be the king. Jesus is the king, and that's why he did. Does that make sense? It's who he is. He did what he did because of who he is. He did not do what he did to become who he is. And the way of the world is I have to strive and achieve and work my way up the ladder and become something. But Jesus has been given this position by God, and so what he comes and does, he does because of who he is, not to become who he is, if that makes sense. Okay. John also does not include a lot of the events of this last evening of Jesus' time here on earth, at least before the resurrection, that are mentioned in the other Gospels. So it's really worth going to the other three Gospels and looking at the same accounts, and we're going to jump into Luke a little bit just to set the stage. What's a lot of commentators really note is that there's no mention of communion. This is the Last Supper. I had the slide up here. It's the Last Supper. John doesn't talk about the ordinance of communion at all. He doesn't mention it at all. Okay, but if you go to the other Gospels, you'll see where that's included. Now, John does mention some things that are also in the other Gospels. Many scholars believe that the book of John was the last one written and that John had access to those other books and that he was selective in choosing. He didn't necessarily feel the need to repeat everything. Sometimes he did, right? And he's guided by the Holy Spirit, and so there's perfection in what he has done, and we can trust in that. Oftentimes, there's a huge section here that we're just starting, and it's called the Upper Room Discourse. And so I have that up here on the slide. At the Last Supper, we got Da Vinci's painting, the Upper Room Discourse. John never mentions this upper room, but Luke tells us this, and so that's where that comes from. So there's no mention of communion and several other details that are left out of the book of John, but those details are all filled in through the other Gospels. I'm going to read from Luke, where he really sets the stage, and we can see where this upper room detail comes from. This is chapter 22, verses 1 to 13. Now the feast of unleavened bread, called the Passover, was approaching, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some way to get rid of Jesus, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12, and Judas went to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard and discussed with them how he might betray Jesus. They were delighted and agreed to give him money. He consented and watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them when no crowd was present. So that's the conspiracy that's already taken place before what happens in John, what we just read to happen in John. Judas has already done this. He's just waiting for the time to signal that they can come and get him. The issue is the people, that if Jesus had a lot of people around him and they tried to arrest Jesus while he had a lot of followers, that they would resist. And so they're looking for an opportunity where Jesus is vulnerable. Verse 7, Then came the day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, Go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover. Where do you want us to prepare for it? They asked. He replied, As you enter the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him to the house that he enters, and say to the owner of the house, The teacher asks, Where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a large upper room, all furnished. Make preparations there. They left and found things just as Jesus had told them, so they prepared the Passover. And so this is what the upper room is, where this dinner is taking place. And so this upper room discourse, which goes on for like 4 chapters, it's not all in the upper room. They actually leave after all this goes down with Judas, and so it continues on, but they just call it the upper room discourse. So you got 4 chapters of John pouring out Jesus' guidance and direction. These are last-minute instructions because the time is short. And so as we jump into our text here, we're on John chapter 13, verse 21. After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified. So this is just after washing everybody's feet, including Judas's. He had demonstrated this very important principle that we are to lower ourselves and serve those who are beneath us. And this goes against our natural state our fallen nature. It goes totally against our fallen nature. And he says to do this without limit. Jesus is about to do the very same thing. He's going to go do this, and by going to the cross, he is going to lower himself to the place of a criminal. He's going to die a humiliating death. Okay, and they went and they went out of their way to make this absolutely horrific and humiliating to him. Okay, and so he's demonstrating that by taking our punishment for us. He's saying that we are to use our position, whatever that is, to be of service to others. He's the King of Kings, and as we have talked in previous sermons, that means he is high above us in position, and we don't know. We have no way of even understanding. We could kind of follow the chain of command up to like the president, and we would understand that, and we could see all the layers of government and all those things, all the people that are working. All we hear is that there's a multitude of angels, people, a council of elders. There's all kinds of structure within the governance of heaven that we don't really understand or know anything about. And he's at the top of that. And he's beyond imagination how high he is. And so I gave the example of calling the president the other day, that it would be absurd for me to get a line into the president, right? And how amazing it is that Jesus, who is so far and above him, he wants to hear from me, whereas the president does not have time for me. It would be a total waste for him. And even if I called him with a legitimate issue, he's not going to talk to me, right? But Jesus wants to hear from us and has the capacity to handle that. So he's the King of Kings at a height of which we cannot understand, and then he lowered himself to the absolute lowest position, but he tells us to do the same thing. And so I coined a term for this. It's called leveraged exchange, that whatever your position is, you have to use that to the benefit of others. Ooh, this is tough, because in this world, there's a lot of rotten people that will take advantage of you. And so it requires discernment, and we have to be wise as serpents, but gentle as doves. But what's amazing is he's telling us something about how the kingdom of God works. It's a total inversion of our world. This world, the fallen world, the people that are on the top are going to end up on the bottom, right? If they make it into heaven at all. And he says the first will be last and the last will be first. It doesn't mean like a poor person immediately catapults to the top. He's not talking about like worldly wealth or something like that, or worldly position. He's talking about something else. Those that put others first, and they do this thing of leveraged exchange, using their status and their position to help others, they put other people before them, and by putting themselves at the end of the line, when the time comes to go to heaven, it has been revealed where their position will be in the kingdom of God. So here we go. So Jesus has washed their feet. It's this very, very beautiful thing. And then he gets troubled and he says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." This is the 12, the apostles. They can't imagine who this is going to be. And that's coming up here, right? This is a really important thing, though. As I pointed out previously, Judas is going to use his position as an apostle to turn Jesus in. Now, he's been granted that position. He was let in. Now, Jesus has known the whole time what's going to happen. He knew the whole time. And he has been allowing this to go on. And one of his 12 is an imposter, and he's allowed it to go on, and here comes the moment. And Judas uses his position, his status, to turn Jesus in. And what does he get? 30 pieces of silver, right? Regardless of how much silver he gets, it's a finite amount. And the treasures of heaven that we get for being with Christ are infinite, whereas this is very, very finite. It's not worth it. So why does he do it? It's going to mean the prosecution, torture, humiliation, and execution of the very person who gave him that position in the first place. Right? The guy that gave him that position, that put him there, he's going to totally surrender him to his enemies and have him destroyed. There's also, what in economics we call this opportunity cost. There's also an opportunity cost. You turn Jesus in and get him killed. Now all the good that Jesus would have done can no longer happen because you went and got him killed, right? I mean, we know the whole story, so this isn't going to stop Jesus, but it actually reveals something about Jesus. So Judas, who stands to lose the very position he holds that Jesus has given him after his rabbi is killed, he's going to get 30 pieces of silver. And we got to ask, is this worth it? It's ridiculous. This is self-sabotage, right? It's we think of Esau and the bowl of lentil stew. He gave up his inheritance for a bowl of lentil stew. And we think this is ridiculous. Like, why would anybody do this? Well, we do it all the time. We do it all the time. Sometimes people talk about Samson falling for Delilah, and even though he knows she's lying to him and he keeps going back, well, he's weak, right? When it comes to Delilah, he's very, very weak, and he keeps falling into that trap. And to judge him, we have to be careful because we do the same thing, right? What does the Bible says? It says a dog returns to its vomit. And so self-sabotage is a characteristic of our sinful nature. Verse 23, the disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. They're shocked that one of them is a fake that's going to betray Jesus, but they don't know who it is, except one of them does, and that's Judas, right? So Jesus has made this proclamation that one of you is going to betray me. And they're like, who could this be? Who could this be? Well, Judas knows who it is because as we just read in Luke, he's already made the deal. And he knows. And so Jesus says to this whole group, knowing that Judas knows he's the betrayer, and Jesus knows, Judas knows, everybody doesn't know except those two. But so these actions are happening with that in mind. And so there's a critical doctrine that we need to apply here, that we cannot see what God sees or know what God knows. Some people are destined to hell, and others are destined to heaven. And we don't know which is which. What appears to be a terrible person, the worst of the worst, they might be on track to go to heaven. And then there might be someone that looks very righteous, very good. You were just mentioning a televangelist. They look good. They got the great smile. They got the position. Everything looks right, but yet they're on their way to hell. So we blind ourselves to this reality because it's too much for us to handle. That's why it's so great that we've got a Savior and a God who is a perfect judge. We struggle to understand even this concept. We want everyone to go to heaven, or at least most people. We want most people to go to heaven because if most people are going, then I'm probably going too, right? And I think that's at the core of it. We may not say it that explicitly, but that's what's really going on. For me to be at ease with my own condition, I've got to kind of have this very broad, easy way to heaven that, most people are probably okay. They're good people. They didn't do anything really wicked. But it doesn't work this way at all. And so as Christians, we will find reassurance in our salvation by understanding these things, that we can really know whether we are saved or not. And this passage really helps us understand who's going to heaven and who's not, although we may not be able to tell ourselves, right? A way that I kind of have come up with to understand this is that regardless of the person's condition, heaven wouldn't be heaven without that person. Okay? And I'll say this in a self-centered way. I feel this way about my daughter. Like, if I'm going to heaven, how could it possibly be heaven if my daughter's not there? Right? Now, I don't know her fate. God is the perfect judge. He's going to decide that. Right? He's going to weigh her life and her condition, and he is able to judge perfectly. And so it's up to him what happens to her. Okay? But for me, I cannot comprehend a heaven without my daughter. Right? And so I say it couldn't be heaven. It wouldn't be perfect if she wasn't there. Or if my parents aren't there, it wouldn't be perfect. Right? Well, there's some people, and only God knows who they are, it couldn't be heaven if they were there, right? Because in our current condition, we'd all ruin it, right? It couldn't be perfect if we were there. And so there's a catch-22 here, right? That on the one hand, if the people aren't there, it's not heaven because they're not there. It's not complete. It's not perfect. But at the same time, if you put fallen people into heaven, then heaven's ruined. It's not heaven anymore. So we have a problem with that. But God is able to understand and discern these things and figure them out, and we can trust in him and knowing who's who and what's what. And this is a perfect passage for delving into that and understanding kind of how to trust, where to put the trust, and where to use discernment as far as determining who's who and what's what. The explanation of this all is in Matthew 13, where there's two parables that really touch on this. I'm not going to read from it directly, so you don't have to turn there. The parable of the sower and the parable of the weeds, both of those deal with this in depth of like kind of understanding what's going on. And so what we're saying is that some people are destined for hell and some people are destined for heaven. And we can't tell because some of them are in a bad state, some of them look good, but we don't know. And so the parable of the weeds, we have a farmer who plants a bunch of good crops. And then his enemy comes in and sows bad crops, but they're not just, or they're weeds. He sows the weeds, but these weeds, they look just like the wheat. So oftentimes the translations will call this the tares, the weeds or the tares. Or some scholars have looked into this and they say it's this plant called darnel. It looks just like wheat, and you won't know if it's wheat or not until it gets to its very final stage when it grows its fruit, right? If it has wheat berries, then it's wheat. If it's this weed, the darnel, it's worthless. It's useless. Yeah, but you won't know until the very, very end. So this is a problem because if they go and try to tear up the ones that are weeds, they're going to mess up and take some of them that aren't weeds. They're going to pull some of the wheat, right? And the way Jesus describes it in this parable is that their roots are entangled. So even if you're confident you're pulling on a darnel, you might damage the wheat. So he says in the parable, just let it all grow together. And at the very end, we'll sort it out. And so you'll see this happening, particularly with Judas and Peter here. So I'm going to make the case that Judas is the weed and Peter is the wheat, right? And so why is it that they get different treatment? Well, one is destined for heaven and one is destined for hell. Okay, so coming up, and we kind of went way on a side trip there. It's important to note that in this dialogue that's going on, sometimes Jesus is talking to the whole group, like when he says, one of you is going to betray me, everybody's looking at each other like, oh, who is it? Like, how could this be? Like, who? Which one of these? Right? And then other times he's having private conversations. And so what's coming up here is now a private conversation. One of the disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at a table at Jesus' side. So Simon Peter motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. Okay, so we need a little bit of explanation here. This is Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Leonardo, unfortunately, did not have all the resources that we have today, and so he messed this all up. This is not at all what the Last Supper looked like. Right? It's just a painting of a bunch of guys sitting at a table. This is like European style, sit in a chair, right? Well, what these guys were doing, as it says, reclining, they're actually doing something like this. This is called a triclinium, which is the way the Romans and the Greek would eat. They actually would lie down or recline to eat. And this seems so foreign to me. They probably would think the same thing about us sitting in a chair, right? But they would lie down. This is like a real fancy elite dinner, right? You've got your mosaic tile floor, and you've got all the food there. They'd have meaning three. It's a three-sided like sofa, and you could recline. That's the cline part on the triclinium, and the servants would bring in all the food, and you would just sample. And it's just a very leisurely way to eat. And so they're doing this. And so Jesus is reclining, and John is reclining right next to him. And so that's what's going on with this, why there's this reclining thing happening, which just seems very foreign and strange to us. So now John does not use his own name. He says, the one that Jesus loved. And so scholars have really looked into this. They think that perhaps he was this is his way of being humble, or putting his relationship with Jesus first. Instead of using his name, he's not defined by his name. He's defined by his relationship with Christ, which I think is pretty interesting. It's just speculation, but I think that's worth considering. So it says, one of his disciples, whom Jesus loved, so that's John himself, was reclining at the table at Jesus' side. And so Simon Peter, who is not sitting right next to Jesus, is motioning to him, right? And so some commentators will say these are fishermen. They got all kinds of hand signs because they're used to being on the boat in a storm. And so he's like, hey, John, like, what's going on? Like, who's the one that's going to betray him? What's worthy of noting here is that where you sit at this table determines your status. In other places in the Bible, you'll see where there's like all this fighting of who's going to sit where. And so Jesus is like the big shot guy, and whoever gets to sit right next to him is the one of his preference. And so you'll see that John is in the place of preference in relationship to Jesus. So that disciple, John, leaning back against Jesus, said to him, Lord, who is it? This is a secret conversation. Jesus answered, it is he to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it. This little piece of information is only for John, and maybe John is able to communicate that back to Peter. But so this whole idea of him dipping the morsel and then giving it to the betrayer is only known by a few people, not even Judas in this case, right? So it's probably just John and Jesus, maybe Peter. No, it's not like a reality show. You guys seen these? You probably don't watch reality shows. They always have these like big things at the end where somebody gets kicked off the island or something, and it's very humiliating, and it's all this dramatic, heavy drum beat about who's going to be that's going to get off the show. They lose the contest, and you don't know, and then they find out. And they do some goofy thing, like they don't come out and say, Nancy, you're off the show. They come and give you something, and that signifies you're out. And I have thought of this passage in that way when I was younger. I thought all of this was pronounced to the entire group, and Jesus says, the one who will betray me, I'll give this morsel to, and then he gives it to Judas, and everybody now knows it's Judas. Well, that's not the case at all, and it's very clear in the text here. So this is a secret conversation. He tells John, the one that I dip this morsel, or the one I give this morsel of bread to, is the one who is the betrayer. Okay. What's very fascinating about this is, as Jesus is about to tell us how to love one another, he's actually demonstrating this right now. Instead of humiliating Judas, saying, get out of here, you rotten scoundrel, you turned me in, and I know you did it. He doesn't do that at all. This is a gesture, at a Jewish table like this, at a formal dinner, it's a gesture of honor for the host to take a morsel of food and to feed it to one of the people at the table. And so he's actually committing an act of honoring Judas right as Judas is about to turn him in, right? So this is pretty remarkable love. I think it exceeds a worldly definition of love. The world thinks this is foolishness, right? Like, why would you honor the very person that's about to turn you in? So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. So this is an act of love, not public humiliation, although it is secretly communicating to Peter and John what's going on. Jesus is using his position and his status in a demonstration of honor to a scoundrel. Totally doesn't deserve this at all. It's a dramatic display, not only of meekness, not only of tenderheartedness, love, forgiveness, but it's also a demonstration of Jesus' authority. Doing this is not going to harm Jesus' position in any way, right? As we are living life in this world where there's constant challenge and difficulty, especially for kings and queens, right? They're always facing, you can see King David dealt with this all the time. Somebody's always trying to poison him or kill him or do something. He's always got somebody after him. Jesus is not concerned with his position because he has ultimate authority. And as a matter of fact, he is behind the very betrayal that Judas is about to commit. And we'll see that here shortly. So he's not worried about this or anything. he's going to kick off a long series of events that's very similar to the blind beggar that he healed with the spit and the mud. If you remember that, where Jesus kind of put the mud and the spit in the guy, and they told him to go wash in the pool, and before anybody figured out what was going on, Jesus was gone. Well, so this act that he's about to do right here, right now, is going to set off a long chain of events, but on a much grander scale. So before, when he did this with the blind beggar, it ended up humiliating and frustrating the Pharisees. Well, this time, it's a much bigger battle. And his enemy, Satan, his entire kingdom is going to come down as a result of this tiny action. I think we tend to overlook this. This is like a critical pivot in what's going on. And Jesus is going to give Judas a command here that sets everything into motion. And Jesus doesn't really have to do a whole lot after this point. It's almost as if the things are happening to him. Now, I don't want it to sound like he's not in control, but it's already all planned out and predetermined, and the initiation kicks off. The military's like this, right? They have such a complex operation going on that they have to have everything planned out, and they just issue one command, and then it all happens, right? It's very complex. And so Jesus is the king, and he's about to initiate a battle plan that starts with a simple command, and it's going to lead to the salvation of the world. It's going to lead to an awakening that's just unbelievable. It's going on right to this moment today, and it all starts with this interaction with Judas. Verse 27. Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him, and Jesus said to him, "What you are going to do quickly." And there it is. You know, we tend to like these one-liners in action movies where, the hero demonstrates how tough or cool they are with just one quick little quip. But boy, this one is so far and beyond anything that we could even understand. Jesus is issuing heavenly kingdom level commands. Right here, it's happening. This is the pivot point where everything is going to unfold after this. This is the go signal. And he does this in love and humility. He's going to destroy Satan's kingdom, one command, and he does it in love and humility. It's much more than just Judas. This is about much more than just Judas. Judas is a player in this, but it's much more than that. This statement right here, what you are going to do quickly, is a death sentence for evil. So the restraint against Satan and Judas was immediately released, and Judas is going to go let the authorities know it's time. They're going to intercept Jesus at the garden. Jesus has initiated this command. This is all happening under his authority. It's not Judas. When you have a saboteur, they're trying to take authority, and so Jesus here is demonstrating his authority by he's telling him to go and do it. What you're going to do, go and do it. He's the one in control. He is the one ordering it. And now things are in motion. Okay, Judas leaves. Or not quite yet. Now, no one at the table knew why he said this to them. Remember that conversation, part of the conversation was private. The whole part about who I give this morsel to, that was just between John, Jesus, and probably Peter. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, buy what we need for the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. So Jesus could have humiliated Judas, called him out for his betrayal, and made a big scene, and everybody would have judged Judas and like, oh, wow, that guy's a bad guy. He lied to us the whole time. He was a fake, and now he's going to betray Jesus. This is horrible. But instead, he goes to him with love and a sign of honor, an act of honor. He gives Judas the piece of bread. Judas already knows what he's doing, and Jesus says, do it. Go do it. What you got planned, go do it. And he does this in love. He had just washed Judas's feet. And now, in an act of honor, he sets this in motion, an act of honor and love. But it's also one of the most profound demonstrations of his divine authority. It's a miracle. It's a mighty work. This is something that we humans would have a very hard time with. It had to be this way. And it was night. So some commentators remark at this short sentence and they say, like, okay, John uses light and dark as a metaphor often in his gospel. And so as they're describing, as John is describing Judas leaving into the night, it's talking about him being cut off from the light and being immersed in darkness. I thought that was interesting. Judas is gone, and now the conversation changes. But now there's urgency, right? Time is short. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once." Okay, when we hear these like sentences from the Bible, sometimes it can just sound like glorify God, me, him, right? It can be very confusing, but there is a tremendous deep meaning in this. It's now Jesus' time. The hour has finally come. Jesus is about to overthrow Satan's kingdom. And so as he does that, it's going to bring glory not just to himself, but to the Father. And it goes back and forth. When God is glorified, Jesus is glorified. And Jesus is glorified, God is glorified. And this is just amazing. So all of the ways of the world that I've been talking about, this is the kingdom of darkness, right? Might makes right. What's in it for me? Get as much as you can by doing as little as you can. And there's many more of these. We live in an evil, corrupt world. So like just the way things are is corrupt. And the way things work is corrupt. And so this is the dark kingdom, right? And he is going to conquer that kingdom. He's going to give everything that he has to the point of humiliation and death, so others may have what he has, eternal life, righteousness, and getting to live with God. And that does not make sense to us. If you were like a wealthy billionaire, you would not just go find some poor slob on the street and give him all your money. You wouldn't do it, right? Well, Jesus knows how to do this and transform people in the process. Our hearts are evil. I'd say sometimes that our wanter is broken, the things that we want. The way we think is skewed, it's distorted, and we feel like it's right when it's wrong. And Paul even says this, is I want to do good things, but I do bad things, right? Something is not right. My compass is not calibrated correctly. And so what I want and what is good are different things. Jesus is about to reset things and make it right. Okay, and that reveals a tremendous amount of glory from God. And remember, Jesus isn't doing this in order to be king. He is the king, and that's why he's doing this. Whereas we're very much kind of works-focused in the world, and we even carry that into our Christian religion sometimes. In the world, being humiliated and crucified are not something you would aspire to, right? This is not a win. We might call this bad, like really bad, like worst, failure, total disaster. But he says this is good because it's done to benefit others, like legitimately benefit others. And Jesus didn't have to do this. It was not a requirement. He chose to do this. And that kind of love destroys the kingdom of darkness. Verse 33, "Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come." And he's saying this with urgency. Like, look, I'm leaving. You're not going to like this, but I got to go. And it's almost like a parent that needs to leave, and they're leaving the kids, and they're like, you can't come. And the kids are like, but I want to go. And like, no, you don't. You don't want this. Well, because what he's talking about is he's going to have to die. He's going to be killed. And he has told them this over and over and over again, but they just don't understand. And we can look down on them for like kind of not getting this, but we struggle with this too. When the reality sets in of what it means for him to go away, it's going to be horrible. It's shocking. It's beyond their imagination. This guy is the king of the universe, and he's going to be killed. Like, that's hard to imagine, even though he has told them this. When he tells you this, he's going to a place that you cannot come. He's hinting at the fact that he will be killed, but he's not terminated. He's not like erased. It's not over. He's just leaving, right? His separation of his worldly body and his spirit. He's not over. It's not the end of him. He's just going to go to the place where spirits go when they're separate from their bodies. And you can't go there because you'd have to die to go with them. And you're not ready yet. There's a lot God has for you to do while you're here. Okay. So he says that, and now he's going to give us a new commandment. Verse 34, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. So he is changing the subject. He said, I'm going away. You can't go with me. They don't like this, but he's like, okay, look, I'm going to give you a new commandment. Now, this is a big deal because God gives commandments. Like the 10 Commandments were given by God. And so this really demonstrates his authority. Again, his authority is on display here. He has the ability to give commandments, and so he is God. But this one isn't totally new. You probably have read this in the Old Testament in several places, that you're to love one another. So why does he say it's new? This is just because the English language is not able to translate this well. The Greek word for this means refreshed, renewed, new and improved. And so we don't have a good way of expressing what Jesus said in this. So it's not that he's saying this is brand new, but you already had it. It's being renewed, and he's raising the bar. And so it's new and improved. He's expanding their understanding of what it means to love, but it's not just expanding their understanding. He's putting a mandate that you are to love like I love. It means doing things for others at a cost without expectation of return. And not just little things. He's going to give everything, even his life. And in this, it means that we are to be genuine in how we forgive one another, how we help one another, how we sacrifice for one another. It's to come at a cost. And if it comes at a cost, it's the best. I'm going to give an example. When I was a Boy Scout, we went on a hike in New Mexico, a 75-mile hike through the mountains. It was wonderful. But I was 15, and some of the boys that went were 17, 18. I think we might have even had a 19-year-old. Those guys had developed a lot more and had a lot more physical fitness than me. And so as we're hiking through these mountains, they're eager to prove themselves and show how great, how strong they are. And so they want to blast off and get ahead of the whole group. But our leader really had a different plan in mind, and I think it touches on this very, very well. He said, put your slowest person in the front. And then it's the job of the people behind him to encourage him. And so they'd put the slowest person in the front, which was not me, but we put the slowest person in the front. And instead of it being about me doing this as quick as I can and showing off for everybody, it is turned to, we got to support this guy. And then that guy at the front feels the burden to not hold up the group, right? Before, when the guys in the front just took off, the guy in the back could just hang out and do whatever, get lost in the woods, right? But this kept the group together, and it was a good lesson for everyone. And I see value in that lesson in my life to this day. Even in this position that I'm in right now, I feel like the guy at the back of the line that they put in the front. But it creates opportunities for everybody to see things in a different way. And so wherever my weakness is, my infirmity, it's an opportunity for all of us to grow. And it keeps us moving together as a group. Verse 35, by this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. This is impossible without Christ. You know someone is a disciple of Christ if they can pull this off, because we can't do it. We just cannot do it. We fail at it all the time. We're going to fail at it in the future, but that's why we need each other to help us. With J.C. Riles is where this term comes from, with our infirmities, right? That we are fallen human beings even after receiving salvation. An important thing here to note is that when we fail in our love for one another, which we can't, Christ loved us in perfection. We're never going to be like that. Not in this life. And so when we fail, it reveals God's grace. That's beautiful. But when we succeed, it reveals God's work in us. And so regardless of what comes out of us, either way, it's this beautiful revelation of God's glory. And then if we're authentic, genuine Christians, a loss here confirms that we're human, and it humbles us. And a win confirms that we are Christ's. And this is great news. This is fabulous news. Okay, so Jesus is issuing this new command. There's all this stuff to go along with that. It's just this beautiful moment. And then Simon Peter comes back and says to him, Lord, where are you going? He's back at this whole, like, I'm leaving and you can't come with me thing. And so it shows that he just didn't understand anything. Peter didn't understand anything that Jesus just said. His mind has been totally focused on Jesus is leaving and you can't go. And so Jesus says again, where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow me afterwards. So we know this now because we know the whole story, but Peter's ultimately going to be crucified just like Christ. But he can't know that right now. That's too much. He can't know that. All he can know is like, Peter, it's okay. You're going to come with me, but right now, not right now. You're going to have to wait. Peter then says to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. Boy, I think these are probably some of the most regretted words ever said. It's an expression of how he feels, not a true statement of his condition. That's not who he is, not yet. He feels this way, that he would lay his life down for him. But he's going to, as Jesus is telling him right now, he's going to fail at this badly. So what is coming out of him, what he wants, what he thinks, what he feels, is not in alignment with his condition. It's not a reflection of the truth of his condition. Jesus answered, Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. Okay, so we got a betrayal, and now we've got a coming denial. Like, what's the difference? Well, for Peter, who is the wheat, it's not the failure that defines us. We get forgiveness for our failures, right? Which is great. I mean, it's necessary. It's Christ's victory that defines us. It's not our failures. And our wins are his. And so that's what I was talking about. Like, if we fail, it reveals grace. But if we win, it shows that we belong to Christ. This is a win-win either way. The other part of this is Christ had to face what was coming alone. Not only did he have to do it on his own will, he didn't have to do it, he chose to do it. He had to do it alone. It couldn't be that Peter helped him some way, even in the smallest way. And you'll see as Jesus is about to be arrested in the garden, Peter pulls out his sword and he's ready to take out these soldiers and he chops the guy's ear off, right? Well, Jesus is like, no, you can't. Peter doesn't know what he's doing. He's trying to save Jesus somehow, and this is totally not a part of the plan. And so Jesus heals the guy's ear, and he tells Peter to stand down. What's coming has to happen. And Peter can't have any ownership over any of this stuff because Christ is the king, and he gets there by his own act of will, not because Peter helped him, even in the least bit. So back to the questions that I asked at the beginning. We've got these offenses against Jesus, and what does that have to do with the commandment in the middle? It's not Judas's or Peter's actions that determine whether they go to heaven or hell. It's not the betrayal or the denial. It's not even being committed. It's not our actions that get us to heaven. It's our relationship with Christ. And what you'll see is that Judas did not have his heart open to Christ. He was not cleansed. He was a tare. He was a weed, whereas Peter was the wheat, right? And so it was already preordained that Judas was going to go to hell and Peter was going to go to heaven. The other aspect of this is you're seeing Judas at the end. He's at a completion. He's reaching his destination. You're seeing him in his fruit, right? So you can recognize that he's not the wheat. He's the tare. And so Peter, however, is at the very beginning. Peter is being pruned. And so Peter has to have his pride pruned away in order for him to do what he has to do. And so there's a very different circumstances going here. And if we can look at this through this lens of recognizing that there are wheat and there are tares among us, then we can kind of understand why some things are the way they are. So Judas, his journey was complete. It's not quite ended. It's going to be real ugly, and it'll be over for him. Peter's denial reveals his condition, and he recognizes it, right? And it's sad because as he denies Christ 3 times, one time it's to like a little girl. This isn't even like one of the soldiers or something that's a threat to him. He's so freaked out and scared. All this, I'll lay my life down for you, was nonsense. He meant it. He felt it. He thought that was real. But the reality was, even when questioned by a little girl, he's going to deny Christ, right? Well, that's the beginning for him, right? He got all his pride pruned away, and now he's able to bear more fruit, a lot more fruit. And so you'll see, the Bible says, how do we know who's who? Well, you can recognize them by their fruit. And you can't just stop at any one moment in somebody's life and see their fruit. That's why we can't know. But you can see the total difference between Judas, who tried to take Jesus out, and his fruit was getting 30 pieces of silver for a total betrayal, whereas Peter is going to be on fire for the faith, and he is going to go out and make a huge difference. He'll have a tremendous amount of fruit. So I'll say it this way, that Peter's pride had to be dealt with before he could rise to his calling. Like the position that God had for him, Peter could not be in his pride in that position. And so the pride had to go in order for Peter to fulfill his calling. Because God had something better, more glorious for Peter than his pride could handle. And a way we could put this is God's plans are not limited, they're not restricted, they're not compromised, or in Judas's case, sabotaged by us. Christ is king. He has true authority, and what he says goes. He is sovereign, so it's neither our weaknesses nor our strengths that are a limiting factor to God, and that is his glory revealed. Thank you, Father, for everything, for the forgiveness, the great act that you have committed on our behalf to pull us out of our sorry condition and to restore us to your presence, and so that we can look forward to this moment as described in that song about being on the steps leading up to Mount Zion. Like, what a wonderful, incomprehensible thing that we can just dwell in that space of wonder and mystery of knowing what your perfect kingdom is like. And that sets us free from this awful world that we're immersed in, and the muck and the mire that wants to take us down, that we can look to you and your coming kingdom and know that it's going to be a peaceful kingdom, a glorious kingdom, and one that lasts forever. And so that, Lord, we can surrender to that we can trust in you, and that you will get us through, you will help us persevere to the end, and help us get past all the shortcomings that we have. And this example of Peter helps us to see that there are some things that we have to shed, and it's a good thing. It's maybe painful, but it's good. And Peter was so much better for the pruning that you did on him. And so, Lord, I just pray for pruning for myself, and wherever there's a need, that you reach out and, even if it's painful, that we address the difficult things so that we can draw closer to you. In your name we pray.